Hello and welcome to Reinventing Nerds. Today we've got a special guest. Her name is Michelle Beauchamp. She is the CEO and owner of the Champ Group, and she's a sales and leadership trainer, a coach, and a speaker. And today our special topic that she's going to talk about is diversity and inclusion. So please welcome Michelle. Hi, Michelle. How are you?
Hey, Joanie, I'm good. I'm happy to be here. I'm so glad we made this happen. Thank you for inviting me.
Well, we're honored to have you on this podcast, and I've been waiting to talk about this topic for quite some time now. So we are all on the edges of our seats listening in to what you have to tell us. But I know that you haven't been doing this for your whole life, right? Diversity and inclusion. I mean, why don't you first start out by telling us a little bit about your journey and how you got to here and what made you want to do training on diversity and inclusion?
Okay, thank you. Again, thanks for having me. My passion, Joanie, is to help people learn and grow and succeed. That's what I say. And so when I started the Champ Group, I decided that I would focus on leadership, sales, and communication. That's what I've done. I have over 25 years in corporate experience, 14 years as an entrepreneur, and I've always been in sales and I've always been in leadership. So, one thing that I love doing is helping people grow in those three areas. And I do that by working with companies and working with individuals and just help them understand all the greatness that they already have within themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And to be honest, then this summer, I had an epiphany, and it happened because of so much awareness of the racial and social injustice. I mean, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, and that's just to name a few just for this year.
Yeah.
So, I thought, I have a passion for this. Clearly, I have my own experiences
Mm-hmm.
being a Black woman. And I thought, I need to really put my leadership training that I already have in the subject of diversity and inclusion and just make that work. And so I had decided that I was going to do that. And I came across a program. I'm involved in another group, and I came across a program that I could purchase a license to. And so I decided, you know what, I'm going for it because clearly this is a subject that is tough.
Mm-hmm.
Almost everybody has an opinion about it,
Yeah.
you know, and it's a tough subject. And so some subjects that I already teach, listening, the power of listening, the energy that's required to really listen and not
Mm-hmm.
interrupt and jump in there, and the ability to have empathy, those are already leadership traits that I train on. It's just that now we can dig into it on the subject of diversity and inclusion, which does require a lot of listening, a lot of empathy, and then, yes, speaking at the right time.
Right. Yeah. Oh, that's perfect. I mean, this is why you're an expert, both in diversity and inclusion and in the skills it takes to have it, right?
Yes.
Um, I'm just really interested because we have all our tech and our
Mm.
technical leaders and the nerds who are listening in. And, I talk to them a lot about this subject. It comes up a lot. And most people, most are really, thinking about it, diversity,
Mhm.
equity, inclusion, want to do what they consider to be the right thing, and
Mhm.
as much as they can. But I also hear that they don't know what to do.
Mhm.
They feel like they're doing a lot. And some actually um, are concerned about doing the wrong thing,
Mhm.
right? There's so much of that going around too. So, I'm just curious, what is your response to that? I'm sure you hear that a lot, like,
Mhm.
what do I do? And wait, I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to play it safe because, I don't want to do the wrong thing. How do you react to that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And the good news
Mm-hmm.
is that it's being discussed, right? I
Yes.
I mean, that's the good news is that people are curious, they're concerned, and they want to do it. So I look at that as a good news thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I I've been doing a lot of research on this too, and I saw some descriptions I think are interesting for the people who are asking you about this. This one came from Accenture, and it said, companies who take this on, they need to have bold leadership.
Mm-hmm.
They need to have an empowering environment, and they need to be willing to take action. It's like you can't have these conversations and then nothing changes. That's already what employees are concerned about. And so companies that have the bold leadership, empowering environments, and willing to take action, that's good. I will tell you too, because you mentioned it, is that not doing anything, that's what not to do. So what not to do is to do nothing, try and sweep it under the rug. I know I've been talking with a lot of companies, and they've been telling me the same thing. Sometimes we don't want to hear that, we just want
Yeah.
to stay focused on our goal and make sure we're getting our
Mm.
work done. And so they try and sweep it under the rug. Well, Joanie, one of the interesting signs that I've seen at some rallies has been silence is violence.
Right.
Right. And
Yep.
so, and when you and I talked about this before, so if the companies are staying silent because they don't know what to do, then that's not good. So one thing that I'm hoping is that companies will seek consultants like myself to
Mm-hmm.
help them with this program, help them with this real life, real world situation. And that's what companies do. They seek professional guidance when they need help with something. So the same is true with this subject. It's funny. So one example of what not to do. One of
Okay.
my sons was suggesting that I watch the show Office. Okay, so early on
Oh.
when the Office first
Oh.
started, did you ever see that one?
Uh-huh. It's too
They did.
painful for me to watch.
I
Come
know
on.
it. Diversity Day.
Oh,
Oh
I
my
haven't seen
gosh.
that
So,
one.
oh my goodness. And it's funny because it was early on when when it became a show. And I watched it actually not too long ago. Okay, so it was funny, right? But it wasn't really funny. It,
Exactly.
it really was an example of what not to do because people weren't buying into it. They didn't understand it. It was kind of like, okay, we're going to have this diversity day and we're going to check the list and say, we had diversity day. So that's an example of what not to do. The thing to do first
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
is for the leadership to check themselves.
Yep.
I mean, we did say already, it's a difficult conversation and people have opinions about it. So leaders can start off by checking themselves and being, you know, accepting it. If you're not embracing the subject, then accept that, be aware of that because it starts with the awareness.
Yeah. I
Once
love
they
it.
once they have the awareness and they reflect, how can I change? What can we do? So that's the first thing to do because leaders know what they think and how they behave and the message they're sending. That's the culture that they're building on this subject.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, what you said at the very beginning was just acknowledging where they're at. And even if they're not, that's, if you're saying, well, you know what, I'm staying silent because I don't know what to do. I'm scared of doing the wrong thing. Acknowledging that is the
Right.
first step to then taking action, right? Well, how can I
Exactly.
change that?
Hmm.
And I think one of the other things is, as you said, the top leaders, because that's the message they're giving. The silent message is giving to others so that they need to acknowledge that the others are expecting them to take action.
Exactly. And the employees are expecting them to take action. And if they don't take action, or if they start the conversations and nothing happens after that,
Mm,
then it was a waste. And you know what? That's just going to bring the morale down. So so what to do is take a look in the mirror
yeah.
and really and acknowledge where you are and accept that and be willing to grow. I mean, it's all about always, all of us need to always be willing to see where we are and allow ourselves to stretch and grow. When we do that, our employees know that we're trying. I mean, nobody has to have all the answers. They do want to show that they care though, and they do want to show that
Hmm.
something's going to change.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I just wanted to ask you because, especially because our audience is a lot of technical folks, is there something? different that you would give to advice to technical leaders, or like what's missing? I mean, I can talk all day long about the stats in STEM, about how
Hmm.
we have very low numbers of diversity in some areas. You know, it depends really on the area, but women, for
Hmm.
example, is really low. And then when you see the Black and Latinx proportions, they're low as well.
Hmm.
Do you have any ideas of what might be missing for the technical leaders?
Yeah, and thank you for asking that too. So, it's called diversity, equity, and inclusion, right?
Right.
So so there's a lot of parts right there. There's a lot to it. So diversity, starting with that, just making sure that the organization looks different, right? And kind of on that same note, I was actually on a call last week, and there were a lot of people there from the Bay Area. One person in particular had been working at several different technical organizations in the Bay Area, in Silicon
Mhm.
Valley, and he addressed how challenging it was. So the first part is diversity, to make sure that they're doing things. And you know what I hear a lot? Well, we don't really know where to go find the qualified minorities. And
Exactly. That's the
that's
excuse.
right. And so we can't. That has to be like yesterday, not today, and tomorrow, right?
I
It
like
can't
that.
keep on
Mhm.
having that. So, you know, the, it does take extra effort. I mean, maybe someone in the company can be identified. Usually it's human resources. Maybe someone in the company can have the job responsibility to reach out into other communities. Of course, there's the HBCUs, the historically Black colleges and universities,
Mhm.
as well as other ethnic universities. There's a lot of them. So someone's job can be to take a look at those universities in the communities or outside the communities. So that's one. And then there's the chambers. There's the Hispanic chamber, the Black chamber. Um, and then there's the women organizations, because we are talking women here too. So there's the women organizations that they can reach out to. And then another thing too is uh, all these associations have minorities. I mean, when I was in telecommunications for 25 years, there was a particular group called National Association of Minorities in Cable and Telecommunications. Well,
Mhm.
that's a professional organization. There's probably a National Association of Black engineers, Black accountants. I mean,
Mhm.
they exist. So one thing that I would love to see companies do is embrace that effort, and it is an effort to build relationships with those organizations, the chambers, the schools, to reach new people and help them discover where they are. So that's one thing with the diversity part. I mean, the existing workforce is diverse, so we need to be able to make sure that we have the leadership reflecting in that. So those are some efforts to make it look different. I mean, and that one
Mhm.
particular guy said, what happens in those organizations is that they'll say, okay, we have these openings, so make sure you tell your buddies. Well, if their buddies look like them and they
Right.
don't look different, then that's not going to attract the
Mhm.
diversity that is needed and wanted. So, so that's one thing, is to recognize that. And one thing I know is that the people who are in the tech companies are smart.
Right.
And that's for sure. And they know that they want high profits. And as you know, it's proven that companies who have more diversity enjoy more profits. So
Mhm.
it's worth the effort to go out and find the people. So that's the diversity part. And then there's the equity part. Oh man, and the information that I've been reading is that you said it, the Latinas and the Blacks are not represented in the diversity, and therefore, and if they are there, they're not the ones with the equal pay, and they're not the ones getting promoted. And also the Asian women, because, and
Mhm.
apparently this is because of a lack of role models. So obviously we need more people to be mentors. So that's another part of it. It's the inclusion part, right? Is
Mhm.
the mentors, the sponsors. Some training that I've done for companies is leadership training. Maybe they're having a leadership training and they have different subjects each month. And so I've taught networking, and the networking that I teach inside of an organization is about how to get a mentor, how to get a sponsor. Because then back to the role model that we were talking about, that's when you get your role models, when you have the sponsors that say to you, when you do this, let's talk about how you can do that a little differently so that you can impact your branding
Right.
and elevate your position in the organization. So things like that are very important. So mentoring programs, networking inside the organization, those are all important. I mean, little things, Joanie, like who are you inviting to lunch?
Yeah.
I mean, I remember, many instances where I would see people go off to lunch and I wouldn't be invited. And even more important than that, being invited to participate on a committee. You know that you've got certain expertise, certain knowledge. Again, diversity is all about diversity in thought and experiences. And so when you invite someone who's different than you to be on a committee that you're working on,
Hmm.
they feel good because they recognize they've been working hard and the knowledge and wisdom that they have will now be able to be contributed to the company and to others. So including people to the table.
Hmm. Yeah, Michelle, you mentioned a couple things, and one is just inviting different people to lunch is a way to learn and grow yourself,
Right.
right? But also inviting people to committees and all that, even if they're not experts on the topic matter,
Hmm.
they can contribute an alternative perspective. And sometimes that just shakes things up. And it doesn't even have to be about diversity, equity, or inclusion. It could be about, the process that's being followed, I mean,
Exactly.
it's just
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
yeah.
Yeah,
Hmm.
that's the whole point is that, we do have to become comfortable
Hmm.
working with people who are not like us. And it, like you said, it will help people grow because it's things you haven't thought of. I mean, I'm working with a few different people on projects now and we're all thinking of different things. And so it's awesome because none of us are ever going to have all of the answers. But when we bring different people together, then we can get different answers and combine them and
Hmm.
collaborate. And it's really more effective. And when companies do that, their employees are happier.
Okay, so wait, you actually talked about happiness now, and you've also mentioned morale earlier on, and I wanted to ask you about that because how is it affecting morale, like plus or minus, when you get into diversity, equity, and inclusion?
You know what? Let's hope that it's positive. I mean, the truth of the matter is that, as we've said a couple of times now, it's a sensitive subject.
Hmm.
So some people may not like that, right?
Oh, okay, yeah.
So I think that the leadership needs to acknowledge that. Everybody's
Hmm.
not going to say, yeah, let's talk about diversity, equity, and
Yeah,
inclusion.
no, it's true. It's true.
Yeah,
That's what. Yeah. Okay.
yeah. So I think the leaders need to recognize that. But overall, if the company knows that, listen, our world is changing. And the research I've seen, Joanie, it says in about 30 years, the people who are minorities now are going to be the majority. And
Hmm.
so what we need to do now is prepare and create a culture that is inclusive with everybody. And so when the topic of diversity, equity, and inclusion is discussed, morale will be better, should be expected to grow because it's inclusive and includes everybody. We're talking
Hmm.
women, we're talking different cultures. I mean, there's
Hmm.
a lot of biases that we have out there.
Hmm.
And so we can all benefit by understanding our biases, acknowledging them, and then we need to get over it. you know,
I mean, gosh, really? Just yeah, put it simply, Michelle. Just get over it. Yeah.
we really do need to get over it. And companies whose leaders pay attention to this
Hmm.
have higher morale. Interesting too.
Oh.
Um, we do want to address companies typically want to attract the millennials and then not only attract the millennials but keep the millennials, right?
Yes.
I mean, because turnover is expensive and frustrating as heck, right? So one thing that's interesting when I took a look at some generational expectations is that millennials really want diversity,
Hmm.
followed by Gen X. Baby
Hmm.
boomers seem to be the generation that are not as willing to change. And when you think about it, baby boomers have been trained to keep your head down and be productive. It's all about
Hmm.
productivity, right?
Right.
And so that makes sense. So companies who understand that our world is changing and the expectations are different and make effort to pull that in and make some changes are going to have happier employees because they're going to feel more included.
Michelle, I happened to get 2 phone calls this week about this particular issue
Did
about
you?
retaining millennials. And
Oh,
I'm going to tell them to listen to this episode.
did
You
you?
got to do it because, I mean, you also said that the millennials value diversity the most, but they are also the most diverse generation.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it makes sense. So, yeah, go on.
I got a couple of little,
Yeah.
and this is interesting for you to tell your people who called you this week. Well, when they
Yeah.
listen, then that's good. So in 4 years, so that's not very far from now.
Hmm.
In 4 years, 75% of our workforce will be millennials.
Hmm. It's
So
not long.
that means that we have to change now so that we can attract them and keep them. And you know what? I have a couple interesting statistics I want to share with you too, kind of about
Please.
morale
Hmm.
and team building.
Hmm.
This report came from Deloitte, and
Hmm.
it said that having diversity in a workplace increased team performance by 17%.
That's significant.
That's really significant.
Hmm.
And decision making by 26%, and collaboration increased by 29%.
That's a lot.
That's a lot.
Hmm.
So diversity really makes a difference.
Hmm.
And all those are important. And it kind of back to the thing we said earlier, which was profits soar.
Right.
Well, the reason why they soar is because, look, you have more ideas generated, you have more thought, you've got some good think tanks going.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious now. Um, you talked about taking action. You talked about looking in the mirror. You talked about all the reasons why we should do this. How do we take action? I mean, how do we start the conversations and what do we do after that?
And you know what? And I'm sure, Joanie, because you are an expert in communication. So I know this is no surprise to you. So what I'm gonna say though is listening.
Hmm.
You know, when we listen, I mean, sometimes we're so quick to share our opinion, and our opinions matter. I'm not saying not to share their opinions, but first we should listen. And again, it does start with the mindset. You know, I talked earlier about being aware, taking a look in the mirror and being
Hmm.
aware of where you are on this. Well, when you take a look at your mindset and with that, whatever it is, then you recognize, here's how I feel about this. Then the question is, well, that doesn't seem to be so effective. So how can I change my mindset? And then it's, how can I become a more effective listener? So once you say, okay, this is who I am, I'll share with you that in the program that I teach,
Hmm.
we have some ways to identify the role that you play. And one of those roles would be a hesitator. And so the hesitator might be thinking, this is going to blow over. Yes, we saw a lot of things happen this year, but you know what? This is going to blow over. So I think right now we have so many other critical things that we need to deal with. Let's just kind of wait and see. And then when you recognize if that's you and you start to hear because you're listening that it's not okay to wait and see because employees need the discussions, they need the conversations so that they can be more productive and collaborative, then you can start to ask the right kind of questions. So mindset, asking the right kind of questions at the right time, and then listening. I mean, Stephen Covey did teach us that what people want more than anything else, I mean, what a great lesson, right? Is to be heard and understood. I mean, that's what he taught us. And hearing and understanding, those are two different things. So hearing and understanding and then being willing to know. So the program that I have is called From Ally to Action. So first of all,
Right.
anybody they're talking about this, they're ready to do something different. Those are allies. And no matter what the cause is, we all need allies. We definitely need allies. And then the next part of it is then the action part. What's supposed to what happens after that? So it's recognizing that people need to talk about it, and then knowing what kind of, and it's all about welcoming, right? What kind of questions can we ask to show that we are ready to open the door And to use a phrase that we already use, which is invite people to the table,
Yeah.
invite them to the committee, invite them to the table, and then relax. I mean, I think we need to learn how to relax, um, and not be tensed up about it. Recognize that it's challenging. Be okay. Have your heart open. My heart is open, so I'm not going to be judged, and I'm not going to judge. And if we release that, then we'll be able to have some meaningful conversations.
Michelle, that makes me think back to a situation a few years back where I was working with an organization, and the organization decided to bring in more diverse group of people, and it really backfired. It was
Mm,
very interesting how it happened because they didn't follow your advice. And I'll tell you what happened. They invited them in. They were so eager to bring in diversity, and then they were still closed up and didn't open their hearts and invite them to talk. Right? There was still like sort of the in group, right? People just, oh,
oh,
I'll get in the room and they talk to people they know rather than people they don't know.
mm,
And, I realized that right when you said it was like that was the problem. They needed to not talk to each other, but talk to different people that they hadn't
mm.
been talking to and asking the questions and listening. And that would have really made the difference.
See, you know what? And yeah, and thanks for sharing that. And see, and then the problem with that is that then they can say, we tried it and it didn't work.
Right. Oh, no, they had to keep, let me tell you, the organization had huge problems because of this. It
Oh,
was, I mean,
okay.
you're talking about, the disastrous consequences.
Oh,
Yeah,
mm,
the
mm,
chairman got fired and all sorts of things.
mm, mm,
It was so bad because it didn't work out, and that was part of the problem. But um, the I think that you're saying that you don't just, I don't know, pay lip service and put the writing on the wall or invite the people. You have to have that inclusion part. And maybe that's like opening up, listening, but continuing the conversation. I don't
yeah.
know. Do you have any words about that?
Well, you know what? I do. And so, and
Mhm.
you did just, you just reminded me of another example of kind of what not to do.
Okay.
And it really was, I won't name the company, but the intentions were good. So let me say this is that I know the intentions are good. And so that's why we have to have a plan though. I mean, we can't just go do something. We need a plan. And
Yeah.
the best way to have a good plan is to have somebody to help us out, right? So call
Yep.
some people to help us out. So, but one company did have a program that they were going to start the awareness. Okay, so the intention was good, but the result was not good. They started off, and the first culture that they were going to recognize was the Black culture. Then they were going to go to several different cultures, and it
Hmm.
started with the blacks, and then you know what? It never went anywhere else because it
Um,
it, it ended up very badly. They sent a PowerPoint presentation which totally had stereotypes and
ouch.
and I tell you, I remember having a conversation with the leader of that group, and I said to her, "Why didn't you reach out and ask us? I mean,
Exactly.
I'm here, and there are several of us who you could have asked, and you didn't reach out and ask us and say." Let's have a conversation, and we would have told you
Mm.
this is not what you want to do. So again, start the conversation and be willing to continue it. And the thing about it is the trust factor does have to be there.
Hmm.
um People do have to feel as though if they're honest and open, that they will not be retaliated against.
Yep.
I mean, there are people who I'll
Hmm.
give you an example. I'm actually coaching a person right now who works in a large company, and her company started having conversations that went very badly. And her reaction was, this is not a company I want to stay with.
Mm.
And part of that decision making was because of the way they handled that discussion. I mean,
Yeah.
and it's so back to how it affects morale. I mean,
Well, yeah, and profits and all that too. I mean, if people are going to leave,
yeah,
yeah,
it's
absolutely.
not,
That's a
yeah.
huge
It's
cost.
it's really huge. It's really really huge. So building the trust. I mean, in order
Mhm.
for people to really open up and have some honest conversations, they do have to know from each other and have the trust that when I say this, it's not going to come back to haunt me. Is it in 6 months? It's not going to show up on my performance review. Is it?
Right.
So the trust factor has to really be there. But involved. I know some companies have some employee resource groups who are involved in this too, and they're all coming together. The other thing that I do want to say is you want to make sure that not only there needs to be trust and people need to be honest, and it does not need to be a moan and groan complaint session. So
Okay.
that's not going to go anywhere. So I think the rules need to be clear, is here's what we expect, and here's what we want, but here's what we don't want. And in other words, if we say that these things are happening, we need to come up with some action plans about what's going to happen next. How are we going to do this? What's it going to sound like? What's it going to look like? What's it going to feel like?
Okay, so let me summarize a few things that you said that I think are really important for people to take away from this is that first of all, you have to actually look at yourself and be
Mhm.
aware. You have to start the conversation, and it's not starting by talking, it's starting
Right,
by listening.
right.
Right? Asking the right questions to listen. And it's creating the trusting environment so that people can be open. But also, something you said is you need to have a plan and you need to have structure and guidelines. And that's where it really is important to get some help to not just make it a free for all and moan and groan, but you really want to, figure out how you're going to structure this to keep it safe and move forward.
Exactly. Yeah, that was a great summary there,
Oh,
Joanie.
good. Yeah, I'm glad I was paying attention. I was
You were
riveted.
paying attention. You're a great listener. Great demonstration of listening.
Oh, well, okay. So if people want to bring you in or learn more, how do they reach out to you, Michelle?
I would love for people to reach out to me. My email address is michelle@thechampgroup.com, and Michelle with two L's. So Michelle, Michelle@thechampgroup.com. That's one way. My website is beasalschamp.net. So be a
Oh,
saleschamp.net. Yeah.
cute.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. And then, they can link in with me, and you're going to put all this on the site. They can link in with me
Hmm.
at /, Michelle Beauchamp. So you can find
Hmm.
me there. And then I have a Facebook page called The Champ Group. So several
Okay.
ways. Any of those work. The easy way, really easy, is Michelle@thechampgroup.com. So I would love
Wonderful.
all of those.
Excellent. And I'll have those on the notes page for this episode too. So if people forget, it's hard to forget being a champ. So yeah, they can be a champion of diversity, equity, and inclusion.
I
So
hope
this
so.
has been really informative, and
Good.
really appreciate your efforts in making the world a better place, Michelle, and helping others do that too. So thank you.
Thank you, Joanie. Well, you know what? If you didn't have that intent, you wouldn't have invited me on your show. So thank
Mhm.
you for your really heartfelt, what I know, and your genuine intent to make a difference. So I really appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Well, thanks. Thanks for being here. And we're going to thank the listeners and the viewers for tuning in to Reinventing Nerds. You can find us
Yes.
here at reinventingnerds.com. And we'll see you next time.